Hello, this is Randy, and welcome back to another edition of Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. I want to tell you a story that I think you'll get a real kick out of. I was working in Las Vegas about every other week when I first started with a certain company. I was doing water treatment there. This is a story not about water treatment, but a story about an exciting time we had. We had decided to go to lunch at the Hard Rock Cafe. Behind it, they were building the Hard Rock Casino, which has become quite famous there and popular. We could find no parking because all of the construction. We're directed to park across the street at the San Remo Casino. Now, after having a delightful lunch, we left the cafe at Hard Rock, and there were lots of people waiting in line for a taxi. We were glad we didn't have to wait for a taxi. We just crossed the street, got our car. As we were getting to our car, a man goes running past us, and he's running fast. He's followed by two armed security guards in uniform and three men in suits, and they're all giving chase to this one man. They ran through traffic just like in the movies where people are honking, almost hitting them. They crossed Las Vegas Boulevard, and the first man easily jumped the construction fence at the Hard Rock Casino construction site. Now, the two burly security guards were unable to jump over the fence. These guys were buff, and they didn't have, while they had upper body strength, they had a lot more weight to go with it. Now, the three men in suits cracked us up because they didn't even try and jump the fence. They just walked around it. The first man is running around all this equipment in the construction yard. The construction workers are jumping out of his way. It's better than a movie. But the first man gets outside of the construction site, and he runs up the taxi line at the Hard Rock Cafe, and he opens the door to the first cab and pulls the driver out. He's an older man. He just pulls him out, jumps in the cab, drives off in his cab, injuring both the driver and some children waiting for a cab with their parents. Now, but the driver of the stolen cab then turned left on the first street. So he's driving against traffic, and then he drives against traffic on Tropicana. Again, he drives down about a half a mile and turns around. We watch him do this, and he's burning rubber as he turns around in this cab. It's one of the minivan cabs that they have in Las Vegas. He then proceeded up Tropicana, kept going. He turned left to a large apartment complex. What was interesting is when the police arrived, they headed in the wrong direction. The first 2, 3, 4 cars went into UNLV's campus. We got a couple people in the police cars to pay attention to us, and we redirected them where the guy had gone into this large apartment complex. Now, the residents of the apartment complex then directed the police to the correct apartment. It was an adventure. But while waiting for the SWAT team to arrive, we learned that the three men in suits were FBI agents. The man had been skimming money from the San Remo Casino. The only reason they caught him is he increased his skim. Instead of it being a small amount, it went from being about double that. That was enough for them to catch on that somebody was skimming. It wasn't just loss. While I was being interviewed by the taxi cab inspectors, which, by the way, were armed with 4 caliber semi-automatic handguns. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a taxi cab inspector, but these guys were serious law enforcement officials. My friends were being interviewed by the press, and they gave interviews, they signed releases. And when the taxi cab inspectors, the FBI, let me go, the press wanted to interview me. I said, no, I'm not interested in being on camera and being identified. My friends said, hey, this is a chance to be famous. I said, I don't want to be famous. According to the FBI, this guy's got mob connections. I don't want to be famous. So my friends are begging the producers that had their signed release forms to give them back and to edit their faces and their voices and names out. I mean, they identified themselves. It was hilarious. But the guy swore he would not be taken alive. According to even the people in the apartment complex, he'd told everybody that he was a bad guy and he had lots of ammo and lots of weapons. So that's why they waited for the SWAT team. And the SWAT team, when it got there, they lined up and they kept evacuating the buildings around where this guy lived. And of course, the building he was in. But they didn't want anybody to get hit by a stray bullet. They have us standing behind vehicles. And we were far enough away. We weren't in direct line. We were probably okay. What do we know? And anyway, the hilarious part is the people in the apartment complex kept sneaking back into their apartments. So they emptied out the apartment at least 2 times and finally just gave up and said, if you guys want to be that close to the gunfire that's going to happen, you can, but we're not going to protect you. Yeah. Anyway, make a long story short, the guy didn't fire a single shot. They did catch him. They did send him to prison, caught him in the middle of a skim, and they recovered hundreds of thousands of dollars in this apartment. He was in that apartment complex because it put him close to the casino that he was skimming the money from. My friends were on the news. I was on the news too, but they didn't show my face and they altered my voice. I was pleased with that. I really had a great time the next few days teasing my friends that, hey, now that everybody knows where you live, John, they're going to come get you. And the same thing about you, Jim. Nothing ever happened to them. But it was fun teasing them. That took up a few hours of our day, but it was pretty interesting to see what was going on, to understand more about the police and the FBI and what they did with casinos and how they watched them, because we had nothing but time, because they weren't letting us leave. They wanted us to stay and identify this guy once they brought him out. We were able to do that. It was a very interesting experience. I've had several of those in my life. I'll try and share some of the other experiences. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. I hope you enjoyed the story. It really was hilarious. I mean, it was like watching a movie play out in real time, except it wasn't a movie, it was real. I'm actually very surprised that it hasn't been reenacted in either a movie or something else, because it was terribly funny. It was terrible those people got hurt, but this guy was never going to be taken alive and never fired a shot, which is good, a wise thing. But the one thing I forgot to tell you is when they brought him out, the apartment residents, this is the best part ever, started singing the theme to Cops to him. You know, bad boy, what you gonna do when they come for you? They just kept singing it. We're talking 200 people singing it out loud to this guy. I don't know if he got any redder, but he was certainly embarrassed and he certainly didn't want to show his face. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Please like and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. If you can, leave a comment. That helps us grow. Appreciate you.